The envelope was pristine, white, and lethal. It sat on the weathered oak table in my father's sun-drenched kitchen like a landmine. I watched his hands, once steady enough to calibrate the most delicate aviation instruments, now tremble slightly as he slid a butter knife under the flap. He didn't need to open it. We both knew what it was. "Another one, Dad?" I asked, my voice deliberately light. I was home for a rare, precious 3-day weekend. Chief Deputy U.S. Marshal Elias Vance didn't get many of those. The last thing I wanted was to spend it dealing with the petty tyranny of the Whispering Pines Homeowners Association. "Seems that way, Eli," he sighed, his eyes scanning the formal letter. His face, a roadmap of kindly wrinkles and sharp intelligence, hardened. Citation 14B, persistent and willful maintenance of non-compliant flora in the designated front yard aesthetic zone. They're fining me $200. Again. I took the letter. The language was bureaucratic, cold, and utterly absurd. The non-compliant flora was a patch of wildflowers my mother had planted 20 years ago, a burst of defiant color, black-eyed Susans, coneflowers, and milkweed for the butterflies against the monotonous, manicured emerald sea of identical St. Augustine grass that defined our neighborhood. Since Mom's passing 2 years ago, Dad had tended to that patch like a sacred trust. To him, it wasn't a violation, it was a memorial. "They've moved from warnings to fines. Next step is a lien," he said, the fatigue in his voice deeper than just physical tiredness. "Who's they this time? Still Mrs. Henderson?" With renewed vigor. "I think she got a new gavel for the HOA board meetings. Brenda Henderson. The undisputed sovereign of Whispering Pines. A woman for whom the concepts of quiet enjoyment and property values were a religion, and she was its high priestess, judge, and executioner. To me, and to most of the neighborhood who grumbled behind closed doors, she was simply the Karen. Her uniform was head-to-toe athleisure wear in aggressively bright colors, her hair a helmet of perfect blonde highlights, and her eyes held the perpetual, searching glare of a hawk looking for field mice violating CCNR bylaws. My father, Frank Vance, was her white whale. A retired airline pilot and Korean War veteran, he was inherently independent, courteous but uninterested in conformity. His house, while impeccably maintained, had character. The wildflowers. A vintage weather vane on the garage. A porch swing that sometimes creaked after 9 p.m. To Brenda, these were not charming eccentricities, they were acts of war against the collective bliss of Whispering Pines. I felt the familiar, professional calm descend over me, the one I used before serving high-risk warrants. This was different. This was personal. "Let me talk to her." "Eli, don't. It'll just make it worse. She'll see it as a challenge. She already sees you as a challenge. I'm just saying hello. As your son." But as I walked the 3 perfectly paved sidewalks to Brenda Henderson's French provincial mansion, Model B, Lot 1, with unauthorized but mysteriously unsighted Corinthian column upgrades, I wasn't just Eli Vance, son. I was Chief Deputy Vance, head of the fugitive task force for the district, a man who hunted the most dangerous people in the country for a living. The irony was almost laughable. She answered on the first ring, as if she'd been waiting behind the door, monitoring the street via her Ring camera. "Elias. I heard you were visiting." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. They were already performing a covert assessment of my jeans and t-shirt for potential bylaw infractions. "Mrs. Henderson. Brenda. Can we have a word about my father's fine?" "Of course. Please, come into the parlor." The parlor was a showroom of beige and off-white, not a single object out of place. It felt less like a home and more like a museum dedicated to the concept of sterility. "I assume this is about the unsanctioned vegetative matter." "It's a pity, really. Frank is such a lovely man. But rules are rules. We all signed the covenants." "He signed them 30 years ago, Brenda. And that vegetative matter was my mother's garden. It means the world to him. Sentiment is understandable, Elias, but it cannot supersede community standards. That wild patch is an eyesore. It lowers property values. It attracts bees. Mrs. Abernathy's grandson is allergic, you know. It's a safety issue." She delivered this with the serene certainty of someone reciting gospel. "He's not removing it," I said, my tone even, final. Her smile tightened. "Then the fines will escalate. The HOA has the legal authority to place a lien on the property and, ultimately, to seek corrective action through the courts. We even have a standing arrangement with the county sheriff for persistent non-compliance issues. A chill went through me. It wasn't the threat of a lien. It was the casual mention of law enforcement. She said it with a faint, gloating relish. She had cops on speed dial for garden violations. You'd involved the police over flowers? Over a breach of contract, Elias. Over a willful disregard for the peace and harmony of this community. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that was utterly devoid of warmth. Maybe you can talk some sense into him. A man in your line of work must understand the importance of order. She knew exactly what I did. And she didn't care. If anything, it seemed to amuse her, the idea that her petty fiefdom could touch even the family of a federal law enforcement chief. It was a power play, pure and simple. Order is one thing, Brenda. Tyranny is another. Leave him alone. I left her house, the taste of the encounter sour in my mouth. My father was right. I had made it worse. I had issued a challenge, and Brenda Henderson never backed down from one of those. The next 72 hours were a masterclass in bureaucratic harassment. The following morning, a new citation appeared, unapproved exterior accent, weather vane. Then, porch swing constitutes a common area nuisance, audible disturbance. The fines piled up, $200, $350, $500. My father grew quieter, more withdrawn. The spark in his eyes, the one that told stories of flying Mig Alley and navigating transatlantic storms, was dimming under a cloud of oppressive, mundane injustice. He wasn't scared of the money, his pension was fine. He was heartbroken at the systematic erasure of the home he and my mother had built, memory by memory. I made calls. I spoke to HOA lawyers, who quoted the covenants with robotic efficiency. I spoke to a local attorney who just shook his head. You can fight it, Chief, but it's a civil contract war of attrition. They have deep pockets from all the fines they collect. They'll bleed him dry in legal fees over a $500 weather vane. The sense of professional impotence was maddening. I could coordinate a takedown of an armed cartel safehouse in minutes, but I couldn't stop a woman in Lululemon from terrorizing my father over his porch swing. Then, on the last evening of my visit, it happened. We were on that very porch swing, drinking iced tea, watching the fireflies wink over his wildflowers. The sunset painted the sky in oranges and purples, reflecting off the manicured lawns of whispering pines. It was a moment of peace, fragile and stolen. 2 black and white county sheriff's cruisers turned onto the street, their lights off but their presence ominous. They rolled to a smooth stop in front of my father's house. My muscles tensed, my mind instantly shifting into an operational assessment. 2 units. 4 deputies. Brenda Henderson's pristine white Lexus pulled up right behind them. She emerged, not in athleisure, but in a sharply tailored blazer and slacks, holding a leather-bound portfolio. She looked like a CEO arriving to close a hostile takeover. The lead deputy, a thick-necked man with a sergeant's stripes, approached the porch. His nameplate read Bloom. He looked uncomfortable but resolved. Brenda hovered a few steps behind, a queen with her royal guard. Frank Vance? Sergeant Bloom's voice was gruff. You know I am, Dave, my father said, standing slowly. We play checkers at the VFW. Bloom had the decency to flush. I'm here on an official matter, Frank. This is about the HOA liens. There's a civil standby order. Brenda stepped forward, her voice crisp and loud enough for the now curious neighbors peeking through blinds to hear. Mr. Vance has repeatedly and willfully violated the legally binding covenants of Whispering Pines. He has accrued over $5,000 in fines and liens. As per our bylaws and with the county's authorization for community standards enforcement, we are here to effect a temporary relocation for non-compliance so that corrective landscaping and property modifications can be performed. The words hung in the air, surreal and terrifying. Temporary relocation. They were trying to evict him. From his own home. Over flowers and a weather vane. You're kidding me, I said, stepping off the porch to stand between my father and the deputies. My posture was easy, but my eyes were locked on Bloom. You're here to remove a homeowner, a veteran, on a civil HOA dispute? Where's your court order? Where's the ejectment ruling from a judge? Brenda produced a sheaf of papers from her portfolio. The HOA board has voted and obtained a writ of possession from the county civil court, Deputy Vance. She emphasized my title, a subtle jab. It's all perfectly legal. The sheriff's office is here to keep the peace while Mr. Vance gathers personal necessities and vacates the premises. The locks will be changed. The violations will be remediated. He can return once the property is brought into compliance and all fines are paid. I took the papers. It was a labyrinth of legalese, but the judge's signature at the bottom was real. Brenda had worked fast and dirty, likely calling in favors or leveraging the HOA's political donations. This was her nuclear option. Sergeant Bloom shifted his weight. Frank, I'm sorry. I really am. But it's a valid order. You gotta come with us. We'll take you to a hotel for the night. My father looked old then, older than I'd ever seen him. Defeated. He looked at his wildflowers, at the swing, at the home he was about to be ejected from. It was a look that shattered something inside me. He's not going anywhere with you, Sergeant, I said, my voice dropping to a low, controlled register I used in the field. The command voice. It made Bloom pause. Chief, don't make this harder. It's a civil matter. You know how this works. I know exactly how this works, I said, pulling out my phone. I didn't call my office. I called a direct line to the U.S. Marshals Service District Command Center. This is Chief Deputy Vance. Authorization Alpha Victor 79er. I need an immediate trace and verification on a county writ of possession, case number. I read off the number from the papers. I want the issuing judge contacted now. I want a full financial and conflict of interest workup on the Whispering Pines HOA board, specifically Brenda Henderson. And I want a Deputy U.S. Marshal and a federal duty attorney dispatched to my location immediately. Treat it as a potential corruption and unlawful deprivation of rights under color of law investigation. Use my authority. The jargon, the sudden shift from a neighborhood spat to the language of federal law enforcement, had an electric effect. The other deputies exchanged nervous glances. Brenda's confident smirk faltered. What are you doing?" she sputtered. "This is a county matter. You have no jurisdiction here." I ended the call and looked at her, my expression flat and cold. "Mrs. Henderson, you just attempted to use a local law enforcement agency to execute what appears to be a fraudulently obtained writ to illegally evict a United States citizen from his privately owned property over a gardening dispute. You invoked color of law. You made it my jurisdiction." I turned to Sergeant Bloom. "Dave, you're a good guy. But you and your units are going to stand down right now. You are not touching my father. You are not changing any locks. If you proceed, you will be interfering in an active federal inquiry and potentially aiding and abetting a deprivation of civil rights under Title 18, Section 242. Do you understand me?" Bloom's face was pale. He knew I wasn't bluffing. The weight of the federal government, which he represented in his small way with his county badge, had just come crashing down on his head with terrifying specificity. He held up a hand to his deputies. "Stand down. Back to the cars. You can't do this." Brenda shrieked, her composed facade cracking into something ugly and desperate. "I have the papers. I have the authority. This is my community." "Your authority," I said, stepping closer to her, "ends where the Constitution begins. You played cop. You brought cops to take a man's home. Now you get to deal with the real thing." The sound of a powerful engine cut through the tension. A black Chevy Tahoe with dark-tinted windows screeched to a halt behind the cruisers. A man in a tactical windbreaker with U.S. Marshal in bold yellow letters emerged. It was Deputy Marshal Cruz, one of my best. He assessed the scene in a microsecond, his hand resting near his sidearm. "Chief Vance," he nodded. "We've got the judge on the line. He's reconsidering his signature. Says he was presented with a highly curated version of the facts by a certain HOA president. The writ is suspended pending review. The duty attorney is on her way." Brenda Henderson looked from Cruz, to me, to the retreating sheriff's deputies. The reality of her situation was dawning. She wasn't facing a stubborn old man anymore. She was facing the full, implacable machinery of the United States justice system, and she had just stuck her hand directly into the gears. "You're bluffing," she whispered, but the terror in her eyes betrayed her. "I don't bluff, Brenda," I said, my voice quiet but carrying in the sudden stillness of the twilight. "You tried to take my father. Too bad for you, I'm a U.S. Marshals chief. Now, you are going to sit right here on this porch swing, this common area nuisance, and you are going to wait for the federal attorney. And you are going to explain to her, in detail, your standing arrangement with the county sheriff. You're going to explain every fine, every lien, every call you made. And then, you and I are going to have a very long talk about tyranny, and about the price of abusing power. As Cruz gently but firmly guided a sputtering Brenda Henderson to the porch swing, I turned and put my arm around my father's shoulders. He was looking at me, not with the relief I expected, but with a deep, profound sadness. All this, he murmured, gesturing to the marshals, the attorneys soon to arrive, the wreckage of Brenda's kingdom. Over some flowers. No, Dad, I said, leading him back inside his home. Not over the flowers. Over you. The Battle of Whispering Pines was over. The war, the legal and federal dismantling of Brenda Henderson's corrupt little empire, was just beginning. And for the first time in a long time, I saw a flicker of the old fire return to my father's eyes. It was the fire of justice, long dormant, now rekindled.